So today I finally decided to make a new behind the scenes video. For those who don't know what a behind the scenes video is, I basically take a look at the redstone behind a minigame, and this gives you guys a better look into what actually goes on in my mind when I'm making these minigames, because I need a lot of weird mechanics in order to make the different things that happen in a minigame work. So I'm not going to go over every single part of the redstone, just because that would take too long and it would be super boring. So what I'm going to do instead is have a look at the parts of the redstone that I find interesting and clever myself, so stuff that I actually needed to invent in order to make this minigame work. So usually they rely on some weird Minecraft mechanics. But enough talking, let's have a look at redstone. Before we actually look at the redstone, let's first quickly look at the different inputs and outputs. So the most obvious one is of course the score display, which basically just displays your highest score, like in a real game. You'll see the redstone behind that in a, probably lastly, because it makes the most sense. Then there's the start game button. All that does is spawn new points between the pillars, so you can actually collect those. Then there is the randomize button, which only does what it says, so it spawns these pillars at random heights. And then there is the difficulty button. This one basically shortens the time between the game mode switches. So if you haven't seen the showcase video where I actually promote the minigame, I highly suggest you do that first before you watch this video. Otherwise you won't really understand most of these things I'm explaining. But that's the inputs and outputs. Let's have a look at the randomizer now. This is actually all of the redstone that makes the minigame happen. So it's not a lot, and most of it is actually just display stuff. So first we're going to look at the randomizer, which is the small pink circuit at the bottom, and actually only the, the left half. So the randomizer is actually based on this dropper and hopper mechanic. So every time I want to randomize something, I just activate this dropper and activate the hopper too. So the item that is then dispensed in the hopper is actually stuck there because it's activated by this piece of redstone. There are a total of 5 items, 4 in the dropper and 1 in the hopper. So there's stone, piston, dirt and sand, and then a piece of cobblestone in the hopper. So the item in the hopper is actually random and will be checked by these 5 command blocks. So these 5 command blocks each check for a different item in the hopper. So currently there is cobblestone, so this first command blocks that actually checks for cobblestone will turn on, as you can see here. So the other 4 will check for the other 4 items, and then depending on the item that is in the hopper, one of these comparators will activate and activate one of these 5 command blocks, which all have a clone command inside, and they are all pretty much the same, but they differ in a very small part, that they will each clone this first pillar to this second position pillar, but they each clone it in a different height. So the middle section will actually appear at a different height for every single clone command. So there is 5 different heights, and as you can see here in the pillars, these all are at different heights. Well, at random heights, I must say, not at different heights. So hook this thing up to a clock and you've got yourself a randomizer. This clock also teleports a command block minecart, and that command block minecart actually moves below the surface here on these rails. And every time the randomizer cycles, this command block minecart is actually teleported from one rail to the next rail. So these rails are actually spaced out the same distance as these pillars are spaced out. So once this command block minecart reaches an activated activator rail, it will actually clone the randomized pillar there over to the position where it is currently at. So because we cycle this 50 times, it will actually teleport 50 times over and over again to a new position, and it will actually generate 50 random pillars. So that is how the randomizer works. I do realize that this is not really efficient, not really fast either, but back in the day there was no execute command, so it was a lot harder to do this stuff where you would generate stuff like that. It would have been possible to do it a little bit faster if I used multiple command block minecarts and multiple randomizers, but it already lagged quite a bit, so I wanted it to be as effective as possible and work on as many people's system as possible, because there's always people with slower computers playing. But that is pretty much everything that goes into the randomizer. As I said before, there is 50 pillars, so there's of course also a counter that goes up to 50. Once it reaches 50, it actually just resets the whole system and teleports the player back to the beginning. I actually also had to teleport the player along with the randomizer, because otherwise there would have been unloaded chunks, and you cannot clone something to an unloaded chunk. So that is actually why the player is teleported along. But that concludes the randomizer, so let's have a look at the next part. Next up is the blue circuit, and the blue circuit is very messy. Don't try to understand anything I don't talk about, because it's just a big mess. So I'm just going to try and go over the key features of the blue circuit. So the blue circuit handles the start game, the game over detection, and also just everything that happens during the game. So first up, let's just have a look at where it all begins. So in this position here is actually where a redstone block will be placed when you hit the start game button. So when you hit the start game button, there's actually a lot of stuff that happens at the same time. So one of the things that you'll probably notice when you do this, and if you have watched the trailer you actually know what happens, everything goes dark, so you get a blindness effect, and this is because I'm doing a lot of stuff with the player that they don't really have to see. First thing that happens is the player actually gets teleported above the circuit here, so on top of this blue section, a couple 100 blocks at a time. And this is just to load chunks, so I can actually spawn the gold nuggets that appear between the pillars, that serve as points. So there's currently none because there's no game running. And when you're game over, I actually kill every nugget, so yeah. Oh, you could actually see the wither skull appearing there for a moment, because yeah, that's a glitch in the snapshots. But basically the way I'm spawning these nuggets is by triggering a command block that you can actually see here. So there's two command blocks here. There's one to kill the previous gold nugget, and there's one to spawn the current gold nugget. So the way this works is I teleport the player, and every time I teleport the player, I run a fill command that replaces all the obsidian blocks in a certain area that includes this obsidian block relative to the player. Well, actually not relative, because there was no execute command back in the day, so I actually had to use 10 different command blocks. But anyways, I'm replacing all obsidian blocks with redstone blocks. Those will first trigger the kill command and then the summon command, and then right after that, like one tick later, I replace it back with a obsidian block, so it's reset for the next run. So that is how the whole gold nugget stuff works. This would all be a lot easier now with the execute command, and you'll see in a minute how exactly I'm actually doing the whole fill command stuff. Next up, there is a clock here, a very noob comparator clock that also starts running when the game starts. So this clock basically checks for any gold nuggets in your inventory like this, so it runs a clear command, gold nugget 0, 1. If you have a gold nugget, it will actually add 1 to your score, and it will also play one of those ding sounds you actually hear when you pick it up. So that's the whole score stuff. Next up, there's like 3 command blocks here that just play node block sounds at the beginning of the game. And then the last part of this blue circuit is the clock here that triggers your game mode. So like I said before, the difficulty increases the delay between decreases actually the delay between when your game mode is switched from survival and right after back to creative mode. So that's what this clock here does. So every time this clock cycles, these 2 command blocks are triggered here. The first one sets your game mode to 0, so survival, and the second one sets it to 1, so creative. And yeah, that all happens in one tick, so that's pretty neat. And to change the difficulty, I actually just clone repeaters with a different delay to this position, and that is actually what you see here. So there is this group of 4 repeaters, then there is this group of 4 repeaters, and then there is this group of 4 repeaters. So each group represents a different difficulty, and then to change this difficulty you have of course to press a button that spawns a some block in this position here, which triggers a 3-way T flip-flop, which basically just has 3 states. These 3 states are these 3 command blocks. So the first one is a command block that actually just clones this sign here over to the sign that displays your difficulty. So I actually just used a clone command to display the different difficulties like this. And then below there is the 3 command blocks that actually clone the repeater groups to the repeater clock over here. So that is how the whole difficulty selection works. The whole repeater cloning thing is very weird. Yeah, I still don't know why I did it like that, because I could have done it a lot smaller and better with just a scoreboard, but I wasn't really that experienced with scoreboards back in the day, so I guess I just chose the more old school way. And I was already using this T flip-flop for the signs anyway, so I guess it's not really that much more work to clone the repeaters as well. So let's have a look at the last part of the blue circuit. So this is just a hopper clock that triggers these 2 command blocks. One checks your flying score, the other one checks your jumping score. So flying score is just the distance you fly, and that is actually a built-in statistic in Minecraft. So all I'm doing is hooking that into a scoreboard, and it will automatically increase when the player actually flies. So why do I need this? Well, the only moment the player is not moving is when they are falling like this, when the game mode stuff triggers. So if they are stuck in a loop, so they can't get back up to the opening in the pillar in time, they will just be falling the whole time. Or if they are really slow and can't keep up with the whole game mode stuff, they will actually do this a lot in between pillars. So if this takes too long, your flying score is actually going to be negative, because every time the game mode stuff thing happens, I'm actually decreasing your flying score by a certain amount. So by doing that, I can actually see if a player is stalling or not. So when a player is stalling for too long, it will actually trigger this command block here that will show you a message: you need to keep moving, birds don't float, and it will just trigger the game over mechanism, which are these command blocks here. Then the other way to trigger the game over mechanism is by jumping. So I have a scoreboard jumping, and that's also a Minecraft statistic, and this basically just keeps track of how many times you jump. So if I now jump, you can see I'm back at the beginning because I'm game over. So the only time this doesn't trigger is when you're on this beginning platform, because yeah, it would be a little bit weird if it would trigger here. So why do it like that, and why not just check if the player is standing on a wool block? Well, very good question. We need to go back in time about well, like 6 months, February 2014. I was using one of the first 1.8 snapshots, I guess, and there was no execute command, absolutely no execute command. So there was absolutely no way to check the block the player was standing on. Absolutely no way. This might sound unbelievable, but there was no way. Just like that, there was also no way to check if the player was hitting a block like that, if he was flying into a wall, because there was no way to check the blocks next to the player, because there was no execute command. So I kind of had to, yeah, just suck it up, I guess, and go for the jumping thing, because there really wasn't any way to do it differently. But that is how I detect when the player is game over. So yeah, let's go and have a look at the next part. The gray circuit is actually an extension to the blue circuit, which I've already indirectly covered This is part of the whole point spawning mechanic. So like I said before, the player gets teleported above the circuit there by a couple hundred blocks every time to load the chunks that are needed in order to spawn these little orbs. But because there was no execute command, there was no way to say execute, fill, coordinates, replace obsidian block with redstone block. There was no way to do that. There was no execute command. So I've actually made, back in the day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 identical command blocks that each have the exact same commands, just with different coordinates. The same for just teleporting the player, because I just wanted to make sure that he was in the correct position actually when I was running the fill command to replace the obsidian with the redstone. So if you look inside one of these units, you can actually see first I'm teleporting the player, then the next one that runs is the whole fill command. As you can see, fill, and as you can see, no relative coordinates here, just absolute coordinates, because there was no way to do it differently. And then one tick after that one, the exact same command runs but replaces everything back with obsidian. This happens, yeah, for every one of these circuits for a different position every time, and then all the way at the end of this thing the player gets teleported back to the starting position, and that's pretty much it. So the other part of the circuit is just a really crappy comparator clock. Once again, could have used a very simple scoreboard counter here, but I decided to go with a comparator clock, and this basically triggers the reset, because yeah, you get the blindness effect and a lot of other stuff, and once this clock runs out it resets the blindness, and it also just starts the rest of the game, so it displays the message and stuff that you can start moving, etc. So that's the gray circuit. The purple circuit is a rather small thing. It also doesn't really do that much, and it's also very overcomplicated, because I've done this many times now for other mini games, and I managed to do the same thing in about like 1/20th of the size of this. But let's just quickly go over what it actually does. So the purple circuit basically just splits your score in the first and the second digit. So if you scored 36 points, it extracts the 6 and it extracts the 3. That's needed because, as you know, well, at least I hope you know, 7-segment displays like this are not made to display integers. They are just made to display numbers from 0 to 9, so they cannot really display 13. These are actually just two identical circuits that work identically but display a different digit. So that's what I had to do. I need to split up the digits and then store them in separate scoreboards. So that's all that happens here. Well, let me just quickly explain how exactly I'm doing this. So instead of just using the modulus operator that is built into Minecraft and the divide operator, I decided to overcomplicate it stuff and actually use a clock that subtracts 10 every time it cycles from the score until it reaches a number below 10. So if you just quickly think about that, what it actually does, it's if it starts with 36, it subtracts 10, so then it's 26, then it subtracts 10 again, and then it's 16, and then one last time, because it's still higher than 10, it subtracts 10 again, and then it is just 6. So once it's below 10, it actually starts by subtracting 1 every time. So it goes to 5, then it goes to 4, to 3, to 2, to 1, to 0. I don't know why I did this. I could have just used that as the other digit, but I decided to go with the whole subtracting again. So by doing that, I first store the amount of times I subtract 10 in a different scoreboard. So I have the second digit, and then when the second thing runs with the whole 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I actually store the amount of times I subtract by 1 in a different scoreboard, which is kind of weird, but I know. And then there's also a check if my score was actually higher than the high score, but that actually just happens with the first score that is not split in digits. And if that was also true, it will actually then run this purple circuit and then Lastly, it will also display your score on the 7-segment displays. Then last but not least, the red circuit. This one is the biggest of them all, but is actually the simplest of them all. As you've probably noticed, the top and bottom part of the red circuit are actually identical, which is entirely true, because they are both just 7-segment displays. The only difference is they grab their value from a different scoreboard. So I have a scoreboard for the first digit and a scoreboard for the second digit, which are split by the purple circuit, which I just explained. And when the high score is actually better than the previous one, this red circuit will be triggered, and all it does is there's a bunch of command blocks here with comparators behind, and every single one of these command blocks just checks for a certain score in a certain scoreboard. So I have score decimal equals 0, score decimal min equals 0. So this one checks if score des is actually equal to 0, then the next one will check if it's equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. all the way up to 9. So I have a command block for every single possible digit, and because of this only one comparator will be activated at a time when I'm triggering the circuit. One of these torches will then actually be turned off, so at the moment it is just a 1 for 0, and this is a classic 7-segment display decoder. So this one basically just translates the active signal into which segments of the display need to be activated, which segments do not need to be activated. That's all this whole big pile of torches and repeaters does. So depending on which one is activated, a different combination of redstone lines will be activated in this whole circuit. So a different amount of torches will also be activated, and the first command block in this thing is always a set block command that places a redstone block in a certain position. So for instance that one, that will activate the upper right segment of the display, and then the command block right next to it is basically the exact same set block command, but it replaces the redstone block back to air, so it will deactivate the exact same segment. So by repeating that 7 times for the 7 segments, I actually have a 7-segment display that's very simple to wire up, and it's actually wireless to wire up, so I can make the decoder here and the display actually there, which was impossible before set block commands and stuff. So very neat. And that is pretty much it. That's all there is to the 7-segment display, and that is also all there is to the Flappy Bird minigame. I do realize that this video is about 20 minutes long, but yeah, it's always going to be something like 20 minutes, because there is no way to quickly explain everything that happens in a minigame. But anyways, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next behind the scenes video.